And this one is another one of mine, and it's a doozy.
Yeah.
And it's that
Definitely
attackers,
dystopian.
yeah, attackers are going to hold the internet hostage, is my prediction.
So this is the whole can a cyber attacker take down the internet question, which is, I think in a past podcast, I talked about the one group of attackers that I got to see at DEF CON this year. And they actually went to Congress to testify that it was possible to take down the internet at the time.
Yeah. And this one, I mean, it's been a long time coming in terms of the possibility of it occurring.
Yeah.
It was a few years ago. Bruce Schneier,
Yeah.
a very prominent security researcher, or at least security expert, cryptographer, published a paper where he had been in talks with a bunch of telcos about how people have been probing their systems, looking for critical points, testing their response time, testing how they respond, as a means to plan out a potential future attack. Where if you know, like, oh, it takes them 5 minutes to respond to this attack, or this is a really critical point, when you go try and take them down in the future, you know how to hit them. And if they're a critical backbone of the internet, you can take down a large portion of it.
And I think the same people, you'll get into some of the technology soon, but the people that pay attention to some of the routing tables for those backbones have seen quick changes that seem to be probes as well.
Yeah, the internet relies on a protocol called BGP, Border Gateway Protocol, that is old as time itself. And it's not actually entirely secure. Basically, it's on
that's a scary thing. It's old as time, but it's actually, researchers have pointed out the flaws a number of times, but I think most of the security community will say that it hasn't got the attention that it should be.
No, it's basically on the honor system is how it's run right now, where the internet routers, the major backbones of the internet, advertise what IP address space they own. So they say, I own this IP block, which then trickles down to WatchGuard or Sony or whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's really nothing to stop someone else from saying, actually, no, I own that. And if you can convince enough of the routers on the internet to believe you, suddenly you do own that IP address space on the internet.
So you said there's nothing to stop. There are some things. So let's talk about there are mechanisms you could use, but let's talk about if they're used.
There's a new protocol that folks are trying to push called a remote origin validation, which is a way to validate that you actually own an IP address space when you advertise it out.
Yeah. And by the way, owning has a lot to do with like registrars. The registrars are kind of tied to the internet backbone. So as they're giving out, class Cs of IPv4 now IPv6 space, I guess it's not class C anymore for that, but they can kind of map the world to where the IP should be so that the backbone providers can.
Exactly. So remote origin validation should validate that you actually own what you are advertising. The problem is only 0.1% of the internet as of right now actually uses it. Which means
that was based on you go to a couple of pages where you can actually see all the list of the top ASNs. That might be another acronym we define for people.
ASN, autonomous system numbers. So IP address blocks are part of something called an autonomous system in BGP. And so these routers advertise, I own this autonomous system. And you've got a number that goes along with it, like 65138 or whatever.
Yeah. And there's another page where you can see of the 60 some odd thousand of the ASNs out there, how many have this? And it's
like 60.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like 60 of the routers or autonomous systems out there are using this validation, which means that the other ones are vulnerable to someone trying to trick the rest of the internet into saying that they own that IP address space. And that's like a technical vulnerability. There's other ways you can take down the internet too.
Absolutely.
We saw it, I think it was October 2016, with a very bad day for my productivity when someone did a DDoS attack against a DNS hosting provider called Dyn. And they managed the DNS.
And it's weird. They're not even really a DNS. They're kind of a middleman where they buy domains or they manage domain space for bigger companies, but they're not even the top level, registrars or anything.
But long story short, this one attack was able to take down Reddit, Twitter, parts of Amazon.com, GitHub, basically everything I go to in
I think for like 4 hours, the East Coast, could not get to a significant port.
From just one attack. And now imagine if they hit Dyn and a few other hosting providers or like the main registrars and took down their servers.
And we're focused on BGP probably in this, but what we're essentially saying is DNS is another very core mechanism of the internet. I mean, if unless you've memorized every IP for your favorite places, you're not going to get there. And even if you have memorized every IP, chances are the web application uses domain names in its own code, so things wouldn't work right.
So it's a possibility that, I mean, we've seen bad guys potentially probing weak spots, and we know the weaknesses in BGP that are still unresolved, that there's a chance someone could try and take down the
going
internet.
back to fire sale, and it may not even be the whole internet. If you want to, one way to get rid of communications is when you have a company like Estonia or the Ukraine, where there's actually very few, or there were at least very few entry points to the internet from their location. It's very easily to at least take down that country's internet while you're doing some other
Literally
attacks.
just go cut fiber and then they're dead.
Yeah, or even just target a DNS level or a BGP level flaw only at them, which is very possible because you'd know the ASNs you'd need for their country most likely. So yeah, I think this is a definite possibility. I think this could go subtly or not subtly, because the one thing with BGP stuff is we're talking about taking down the internet, very possible, but governments can also redirect the internet, right? It's not hard to use these BGP flaws to kind of man in the middle huge swaths of people, you know, and there are people monitoring this. So hopefully if anyone saw big changes in routing announcements, you know, at least the SANS, you know, daily handlers or someone would notice. I hope.
Hopefully. I mean, there have been a few instances I can think of over the past few years where some countries have interfered, whether it be accidentally or intentionally, with advertising different ASNs they don't own.
Or maybe intentionally with the accidental, oh, oops.
Yeah, I got
my bad. I didn't mean to do that.
So it is possible. I mean, whether it happens next year or a few years from now.
Oh, I guarantee. Yeah,
who knows?
I'm with you.
What's our defensive tip for this one then? Don't trust anything.
Yeah. Okay. Pretty much everyone, like you see here, lock yourself in your closet. Don't talk to people. Well, really, I think it stands to, as an industry, we need to push more towards these the additional. Again, I already lost the
route origin validation.
Yep. Like
ROV.
More, if you're an internet backbone provider, you really ought to be using that. Same like with DNSSEC. You know, DNS is a big core part of how the internet works, and we still haven't really pushed out DNSSEC as much as it should. So it's just this continued industry push to get, you know, these big providers to start adopting the new security standards that will keep them safe.
I agree. And I mean, even on a smaller level, there's standards they could be adopting to prevent just IP address spoofing too.
Yeah.
So
we talk a lot, was it best practice 38 or something like that?
Sure.
I'm pretty sure it's 38.
Right.
Is it BCP?
Best common practice?
Yeah, BCP
like
38.
Yeah. It's a document that it's for internet service providers.
Pop Corey has some memory left. Whoa.
We're so proud of you.
Don't have to put me in that home yet. What's your name again?
So yeah, with this one, it really is an industry level push where we need to push our internet service providers and even their providers, so the actual backbones of the internet, to secure their systems and adopt protections that can prevent someone from taking down or at least taking over parts of the internet.
Yeah,